Shalom, just getting right into it. For 2 days, they met little opposition, but on the third, Spanish troops caught up with the rebels in an open field and opened fire. Fucking crackers, man. All right, so reading on. I'm going to read on a little bit over here. The governor hired Native Americans for the dangerous task of tracking the fugitives. So he used them against themselves. Reading on, page 35. In the next 10 years, revolts spread to Colombia, Panama, Cuba, Puerto Rico, and Mexico. So that's Asher, Zebulun, Manasseh, Ephraim, and Issachar. In 1527, a major insurrection threatened Spanish headquarters at Mexico City. Viceroy Antonio de Mendoza reported that Africans had chosen a king and had agreed to kill all the Spaniards and that the Indians were also with them. So wait a minute, if the so-called Hispanics, Native Americans are not Israel, then how do you explain that? If we were Japhet like you motherfuckers try to say. All right, so it's page 38. The history of Saramacca people in Suriname in South America started around 1685 when African slaves escaped and together formed a Maroon society. Maroon basically is blacks and so-called natives together. For 8 generations, Dutch armed forces tried to crush their community, but today it is still alive and boasts 20,000 members. For Saramaccans, liberty came in 1761 when Europeans abandoned their wars and sued for peace. So he was getting these fucking cracker asses whooped. Some Maroons perched near large cities and lived as bandits. They raided local plantations, merchants, and even Indians and slaves. Johannes King, an African who lived among the Matawi Indians in the Guyanas in 1885, recalled his people's struggle to stay alive during decades of warfare. Here is the story of our ancestors and their difficulties while they were at war with the Bakras, which means whites. The whites were always pursuing and attacking. They slashed the crops to bits, ruining everything they saw. They set fire to everything they didn't want to carry off with them. Fucking flies and shit. Well, that enraged our early ancestors against the whites. All right, so now mind you, it goes into Leviticus. I'm not Leviticus, Obadiah, where it says, wouldn't a regular thief at least leave some grapes? These motherfuckers didn't leave shit. All right, so it says here, Maroon settlements took such daring names as God Knows Me and none else. Disturb me if you dare. Come try me if you be men. And I shall molder before I shall be taken. So these are the names of the Maroon settlements. Look at this. God knows me and none else. That's clear right out of Amos, the 5th chapter. A Maroon song preserved for this generations in Brazil assured villagers their enemies were doomed. Black man rejoice, white man won't come here, and if he does, the devil will take him off. So we knew then that the devil, the actual spiritual demon Satan, was in league with the so-called white man. African patterns prominent in farming and defense were also important in government, administration of justice, and religion. Many Maroon colonies adopted forms of Christianity but allowed a number of competing religions to flourish. That's where we fuck up. Fuck these competing religions. If it's not of the truth, fuck them. All right, page 43. Before 1700, most Maroon leaders were, like their followers, African-born. Some of these colonies built dynasties on African models that lasted for generations and had royal courts, cabinets, princes, and princesses. Philippa Maria Arana, an African, ruled a thriving colony in Amazonia, Brazil. This is a woman, by the way, Amazon. Her daring forays against the Portuguese armies sent against her village not only defeated them, but convinced the enemy it was wiser to negotiate than try to defeat her. In Paisania, Brazil, the Portuguese discovered Malali Indians and Africans living under the rule of another African woman. You know, Israelites, we're not about that serving the woman shit, but this is just At the end of the day, she was a so-called Judite woman. All right, page 58. These were not slaves, complained U.S. masters, but people who kept their African names, dressed in fine Seminole clothing and turbans. So turbans was a Seminole custom, right? Who else wore turbans? The Israelites. Adopted Seminole stomp dances, just like the dances that the corny ass college students do. Sang Seminole and African songs. It's not looking too good for you motherfuckers that don't believe the Hispanics and Native Americans in Israel, by the way. Still other Florida Seminoles, Africans, and black Indians set up their own communities as they concluded the United States was untrustworthy. Some escaped to islands in the Caribbean where slavery was abolished since 1834. Whew. It's getting hot in here for you motherfuckers. Page 69. By 1843, most of the Seminole Nation, including 500 black people, had reached Indian territory. But in Florida, among Seminole holdouts, randomly flared up like a fire that had never died. Let's see. Let's see. 73, page 73. Seminoles arrived in a country that had ended slavery in 1829 and had welcomed slave fugitives ever since. Some 3,000 U.S. blacks lived peacefully in Mexico, most of them far from the Rio Grande border. Some Mexican politicians conspired with these desperados to better finance their political campaigns. Seminole families had hardly settled down when, in 1851, U.S. outlaw John Rip Ford rode into Mexico with a band of 400 men. Wildcat and John Horse were called upon to drive out the bandits, former Texas Rangers, and unemployed Texans. 60 Seminole fighters drove back the Texans without a casualty. Pleased Mexican officials thanked the Seminoles as faithful and useful in military operations and complimented them as industrious workers. So this is the tribe of Reuben in Mexico. So a lot of you Issacharites are really Reuben, by the way. Not a lot, but there was a presence of Reuben in so-called Mexico, right? Move to page 100. It's not looking good for you if you believe that the Hispanics and natives aren't Israelites. Page 100. In Latin America, Africans had found excellent places to hide and many Indians to aid them. See? You ungrateful motherfuckers. You know, and this is just talking about the black-only Israelites. Ungrateful pieces of shit. Calling us all types of names, and we helped you motherfuckers, man. And I'm just calling you motherfuckers that are ungrateful, not you brothers out there that are conscious that we're the same people. All right, page 103. Reward notices in colonial newspapers now told of African slaves who ran off with his Indian wife or had kin among the Indians or is part Indian and speaks their language good. Judging from reward notices, Africans picked up Indian languages as soon as they reached a frontier region, probably because they both spoke Hebrew. The first full-scale battle between Native Americans and British colonists took place in Jamestown, Virginia in 1822. According to historian James H. Johnstone, the Indians murdered every white but saved the Negroes. I wonder why. A Virginia law set 25 lashes for whites who stole pigs, but increased this to 39 lashes if the accused were a red or black person. Red is because they claimed that the Native Americans were red. And you already know who the so-called black person is. So you gave a worse punishment to a black or Native American that stole a pig than a white person. Virginia soon declared Negro, mulatto, and Indian slaves to be real estate. Beginning slowly in 1670, rules of bondage began to change to permit Native Americans to leave. Virginia began matters that year by stating that Indians were enslaved for only 12 years, Africans for life. So this was the indentured servitude. And this is how the so-called white man, again, pits us against one another. Okay. Page 111. By the way, the name of this chapter is "Their Mixing is to be Prevented." So many slaves fled to the Six Nations of the Iroquois Confederacy that in 1726, a governor of New York made the leading chiefs promise to return all fugitives in their village. They gave their word. In 1764, Hurons also promised. The next year, Delawares promised. No one ever returned a single slave. So we gave our word that we would return slaves, but we didn't. Half a century later, now this is reading forward, 1738, Nantucket, Rhode Island, residents uncovered an Indian plot to attack their city at night and only spare Africans. So we would be getting ready to raid villages and shit and only leave Judites alive. All right. Page 129. They petitioned again in 1812. This time war fever was loose in the land, and in Florida, armed Seminoles openly defiled U.S. troops and slave hunters. The Virginia legislature removed the Gingaskins tax exemption, saying they were no longer Indians. But in 1855, North Carolina, Melungeons were forbidden to marry black people. The state legislature decided that these Melungeons were really Croatians. Croatians were considered white descendants of Sir Walter Raleigh's lost colony of Roanoke. In the decades between the American Revolution and the Civil War, Indian societies were reported in New Jersey, New York, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Connecticut, Tennessee, and Massachusetts. Some managed to live as Maroons, distant from a white society they rejected. White citizens charged some for being dangerous to or a strain on the larger society. White men kept their wives and children away and kept their powder dry and ready for battle. So it's just like now, the white man's stocking up guns and shit for a race war that black people ain't ready for. And Hispanics and Native Americans. Page 148. At the end of the Civil War, and for a variety of reasons, many Afro-Americans left white society to enter Indian nations. Thousands stayed to marry Indian women or men, raise children, and make their living in an accepting culture that was not burdened down with hatreds based on skin color. During this time, many white people also joined Indian nations. You know, the fucking cracker got to come try to be cool with us. Some people of both races were probably attracted by the cash or land offerings the U.S. government made to settle accounts with Native Americans. But beyond these self-seekers, there were many who concluded that Native Americans understood freedom, family, and law better than the surrounding white societies of the day. U.S. citizens first became aware of good grasslands in the Indian Territory during the great cattle drives that passed through to Kansas after the Civil War. By 1872, the railroad had sent its iron horse chugging through Oklahoma's fertile plains. So fucking Esau comes and, you know, while we have, you know, grass and nature taking place, fucking devil puts train tracks and shit. It said it soon collided with a federal pledge to keep Native Americans safe on these lands. All right, so moving on. I want to now go into how Esau used us against one another. Because that's what they like to do. They like to use us against one another. Whites turn Indians. Oh, I already read this. White turn Indians into slave hunters. I wasn't supposed to read it before. I was supposed to read it because, you know, this is a new topic. All right. Few were willing to pursue their most dangerous slaves in an area suited to guerrilla warfare. So the white man ain't ready for fucking guerrilla warfare. The governor hired Native Americans for the dangerous task of... Oh yeah, I already read that. Europeans concluded it was absolutely necessary to remain armed and use one race to fight the other. Europeans would throw their soldiers into the fray and hire Indians living nearby. All right, that's it. I'm going to read. For this video, I'm going to open up with the next video.